So this is the I/O shield, and it comes in the motherboard box, and it's going to go this way in the case so that it'll line up with the bottom of the, like the back of the case, the back plate back here, so that the motherboard can rest on it, and so that these will line up correctly. So you're going to pop that through, make sure it's through in all the corners, and it's good.
So in this part, now we have just the motherboard. So Theo is going to put in the RAM. He's going to put the RAM in the 1 and the 2 slots.
I can line it up.
Because if you keep the RAM in alternating slots, then the memory will run in dual channel, and they will operate faster together. And when you do this, you want to keep the motherboard with something that isn't static, like the motherboard box. This is the power supply. This is the most important part of the system. You never want to go cheap on this, because if it's a cheap power supply and it dies, you're in trouble. So you want to start with the fan down so it can blow air out. And you can put it in like this. And run the cables. Well, cables don't matter much right now. We'll worry about that later. But you would put this right here so that it'll show on the other side. You want to do one corner at a time. And you'll start in one corner, and then you'll make your way across diagonally so that you get an even spread of weight distribution, so that one side isn't pulling the other more than the others. Why is this not going together? So the next bit here is we're putting the CPU into the motherboard. So Theo, you're gonna.
So first you pull up the retention bar. You take your CPU, and you be very careful because the pins do bend. And then there is a triangle. You can't really see it because it's not focusing. There it is. There's a little gold triangle in the corner there. And it's on this corner, but it's covered up because we didn't fully clean it yet. And you line that triangle up with the triangle there on the motherboard. You might not be able to see it fully right now because it's pretty small. But you line that up. You line those corners up. And then you place the CPU straight in. You do not touch the top of it because then it'll need to be clean. Just kind of give it a little bit of a jiggle there and make sure that it's in there. So now we're gonna put the thermal paste on the CPU. And you don't need too much. You just kind of need about the size of a pea, maybe a little smaller, just about that. That's just about good. I'm trying to get it right in the middle. All right, so now we're gonna put the CPU cooler on, which is this. And that's the part that goes on the CPU. But first we need to put the back plate on. So you want to lift up the motherboard and try to line it up with these holes here. And then just hold it in place and make sure that the screws go through and do not touch the surface of the CPU or else you have to clean it. And now we're gonna, it doesn't matter as long as these screws are lined up with the screw holes there. Doesn't matter the orientation, and also obviously as long as this can plug into the fan header. And then you just set it on there like that, and then you gotta try and cross screw it in. You gotta make sure that you have this on a non-conductive surface too, so that way you don't screw up the motherboard. Tighten, but it doesn't really matter. And there we go.
Then you wanna.
Oh yeah. And you just plug the fan header in on the one that says CPU fan. And you can just kind of push this wire along to hide it.
This is an SSD. It's an M.2 drive. They're very fast and very small. This will go straight on the motherboard, just like this. It'll press in, and you hold it down. And then you want to take your screw and put it on top of this other end. And then you can screw it down, and if my magnet lets go of it, then I will screw it down. And you want to make sure, it gets straight in, unlike how it's going right now. So now it's all the way in, there's no flex to it, and a lot of nicer motherboards will come with heat sinks or heat spreaders for SSDs, but this one didn't. So that's our storage done and ready for this computer.
Okay, so now we're going to put the motherboard in, because we've got the SSD, the CPU, and the RAM in. So you gotta kind of lower it in and line it up with the I/O shield that we put into the case, into the side of the case. And once you have it lined up with that, you have to line it up with the screws that were already pre-installed into the case. And you take your screwdriver, take the screws from that came with the motherboard, and you drop it, because this isn't a magnetic one. Give me a magnetic one. This is on. There we go. Now I have the magnetic one. You just kind of screw them in, try and cross hatch them so you go like from this side to that side once you get one of them in. Okay, so now we're going to put in the spinny hard drive. And the way that this one mounts on this case is there's 4 screw holes here, and then you use these little rubber bits here to act as like washer type things to help it not vibrate loudly against the case. But on a lot of other cases, it's different from this, so it will definitely change depending on like which company and which case in specific you'd use. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put the screw through the rubber bit like this, and then you screw it in, and we're going to screw all of them but this one in because this one is built in on the case already. So you kind of just screw it in all the way and just don't over tighten it. So now that I have all the screws in, all the 3 holes that I need to do, I'm going to take this, put it around the other side underneath where these little mounting holes are over here, and I push it through until the little top bits of the rubber gets through, and then I slide it back into place where it does not move anymore. And then after I do this, you take the screw, pop it in here, and you tighten it. Okay. These are the front panel connectors. They come out of the top front of the case up here, and you're gonna start getting these ready by taking them and then putting them through the bottom. There should be a couple holes over here on the bottom, through the bottom above the power supply. So you're going to take most of these, actually almost all of these, except for the one that has audio. It's labeled audio, HD audio. You're gonna put all of them through the one on the right, and maybe one of the USBs. Actually, both of the USBs. So the USBs and the HD audio, the ones that actually look similar, like these ones, go through the one on the left, for this case at least. And then the rest of them go through the one on the right, the hole on the right. You can pause it or whatever. So now that we have the cables routed through, we're going to plug them in where they go. So this was the blue one that says USB 3.0. Goes in the one that says USB 3.0 there. And you make sure that this notch on top lines up with the notch in the connector. And you're going to plug that in. It's in. And then you're going to pull the extra cable through the back for cable routing later, for cable management.
Yeah.
Okay, so now that we have that plugged in, we're going to do the other ones first because those ones are easier. So you're going to use the one that says USB, plug in the one that's labeled FUSB on the bottom. The one that says 1 you should use first, preferably, but it doesn't honestly matter that much. And now you have that done, you're going to do the one that says HD audio. And you can only put these in a certain way, but it'll only go in if it's correct, because there's a missing pin down here where it is correct. So you have to plug this in with the one that's facing down that's empty where it needs to go. Plug that in, and you're going to pull the extra wires through the back for cable management so it doesn't look bad. And now we get to the fun part. We get to these little tiny front panel connectors. So there's small labels underneath on the bottom. You probably can't really see them very well, but they're very small right underneath all these connectors here. And these also have labels on them. This one says HDD LED, reset switch, power switch. These ones say power LED. So you're going to want to try and find, these two say power LED plus and minus. So you're going to find the power LED plus. That one goes on the left because that's how it's labeled. You're going to find the power LED minus, which is connected to the plus one that goes on the far right, not directly next to it. Now that's plugged in, you're going to just find the next connector. So now that we have the LEDs in, or the LED wires in, we're going to do the speaker one because that's the one that's above that. And that one says plus, but there's no plus or minus on the label here. If it'd focus. Yeah, there's no plus or minus. So the way that you tell is there's a little arrow on the connector. You see that on the left? That's how you know where the plus is. So the plus just goes above that where the plus was
And what is this
on the label. And the speaker is for when there's like an error code on boot, and it'll just beep at you and tell you however many beeps. Like if it does a certain amount of beeps, it's a certain error code. So like 3 beeps would be RAM or something like that. And next we're gonna do the HDD LED, which so that goes on the bottom on the far left. But first we want to do. Oh, there's nothing above that. So yeah, we're gonna do HDD LED because there's nothing in the way of that. And it says plus is on the left. So you're gonna make sure that the plus label is on the left. And this one also has that the little arrow on it if they didn't have the label on there. So now we're gonna do reset switch because that one's on the bottom, and that one doesn't have the label. So you need to use the little arrow, which that one, the positive goes to the right. Plug that one in, and this is the power switch, and that one also does not have it, but it goes to the left. And there's your front panel, and you're just going to pull it through on the bottom for cable management, just like this, and there you go. Everything's plugged in. Okay, so now we're gonna use the cable that came with the motherboard. I believe it should have come with the motherboard, and you stick it through, and you're gonna route the entire cable all the way through until you get to this end, which you plug into one of these connectors on the board. It doesn't honestly matter, but it looks better if it's the closest one to the bottom of the board, so that way it just hides the rest of the cable better. Okay, so now that we have the cable routed through the back, we're gonna plug it into the small connector on the spinny drive. You just kind of plug that in and then move the cable down so that it doesn't get in the way. And then while we're here, we're gonna find one of the SATA connectors, one of the SATA power connectors from the power supply, and then you're gonna line it up correctly, and then you're gonna plug that in as well. And you're gonna keep these two loose because we might need them for other parts like fans and stuff. Okay, so now that we're done with the drive, we're gonna route the rest of the power cables to the other parts of the case that they need to go to. So this is the CPU connector. It's not labeled anywhere, but you know that it's the CPU connector because it's two separate 4 pins that are not separating for what. Yeah, they're there. They separate like this, but I don't want to separate them fully because that's a big pain to fix. So you're gonna put them in the top because that's where the CPU connector is on the motherboard. And now we're gonna take a big 20+4 pin here, and then you kind of slide these two together. I don't know why they're not sliding together. There it goes. And then you're going to slide them together, and then you're going to put them in this little cutout here. Well, let me put that behind these cables so that it's a little bit easier and has a little bit more room. Just going to put that in there and just set that in there for now. And then we're going to take this, which is the graphics card power, the VGA, and that has 6+2. And you're going to push that underneath over here where you routed some of the cables for the front panel. Put that through the bottom, basically right above the power supply. All right, so now that we have all of our cables managed and cabled through, not really managed, but they're pushed through where they need to be, we're gonna plug them in. So first I'm gonna start with the CPU one because that one's really easy to block with other parts. So you gotta make sure that these clips are facing upwards and that it's like flat. And you can tell which way the clips face because there's a little ramp on the connector. Can't really see it at the camera angle, but it's like it's on the edge. And they face down on this motherboard. The shape of the pin. So the way, another way you can tell is just the shape of the pin. So this one's square on the left. So the square one goes down here up on the top. And then you're gonna just kind of work it in there and then push it until it snaps. And so now we're gonna do the big motherboard power connector for basically all of the stuff on the motherboard. And since this pin on the outside here goes on the outside, we're gonna have to face it that way. And you're gonna push it in, and I don't know if you heard the click, but it clicked in, and that's how you know you're good. And so now that we have all the other connectors plugged in, we're gonna go get the graphics card. But now that we have everything else pushed in and everything, we're gonna put the GPU in, and you just kind of line it up with the socket, which can kind of be hard just because this case is so cramped, but it should normally just kind of, I think I'm caught on something. It should normally just kind of try and just once it gives a little bit, there it goes. You're gonna just push, and you saw that thing pop up there. Make sure it's in and it's not wiggling around too much. Now that we have the graphics card in, we're gonna take the screws that came with the case, and we're gonna screw these back in. It just took my screwdriver head. And so we're just gonna kinda screw both of those back in, and then once we're done with this, we're gonna take the bracket here that should have come off the case, and then we're gonna take the thumb screw that came with it, and you're gonna screw this back on here. Alright, now that that's on there, we're gonna take the graphics card power that we took out a minute ago, or that we routed through a minute ago, and you're gonna make sure that it's up where there's like these gaps in the board. That's where the clips go. So we're gonna put those up, and you're gonna try and clip both of these connectors in at the same time, so that it goes through, so that it goes in easier, and you don't have to worry about that. But then since this one only has 3, you don't need to worry about this 4th one, and you just kind of clip that one in there and push that down to the side. Okay, so now that we have all the stuff plugged in, we're gonna try and kind of route the cables. And these are the cables for the front panel. And then the extra cables that we don't need, and the extra lengths of cable, since this case has a big open space under here, we're just gonna kind of push them under here. And that basically leaves us plenty of room to put our side panel back on. And then, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, and so now that we have the cables all out of the way, kind of pop that back on there, and then there's thumb screws for this. And just kind of screw those in. Those should be pretty easy to screw in. And then put the second side panel on, and then you're done.